I'm here with Dr. Benjamin Coy, our brass instructor at South Texas College in the music department. Welcome. It's good to have you, Ben.
Pleasure to be here.
Tell us a little bit about this recital that's coming up. You have a solo trombone recital on April 27th in the Cooper Center Auditorium. Very excited to have this. Tell us a little bit about the program, please.
Well, yes, it's coming up on Wednesday the 27th, 7:30. You called it a trombone recital, which is accurate, but the trombone, the euphonium, and the horn will all be represented. Okay. Dr. Robert Ballinger, who is the chair of our Poly-Science department, will be playing the horn, and on that piece I will be playing the euphonium. Since I'm teaching all brass here, I think it just makes sense to represent as many brass instruments as I can.
Very cool, very cool. What are the pieces on the recital?
There are several. There are 6, I think. I'm going to start with Leonard Bernstein's Elegy for Mippy 2, which is a piece for unaccompanied trombone. And then I'm going to go into some of the standards. I'm going to hit the Handel Sonata, Concerto, the Oboe Concerto number 3, which has been transposed down a step for trombone.
So it should be interesting.
You know, I just love to play that piece. There's something you can do stylistically with Baroque music that's just so elegant that I think has been lost in some of the heavier music of more recent time.
But what a timbre change also.
Oh yes, yeah. Certainly. From Bernstein to Handel is a huge change in character.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we're going to go into that duet with the horn. And then I'm going to play a trombone classic by Guy Ropart's The Andante in Allegro, which I think demonstrates just the basic what is the trombone. It's the basic character of who the trombonist is as a person. And then I'm going to play a commission. I'm going to play a piece that was written for me by Stas Omolchenko, who is a composition professor in Tampa, Florida. And he wrote this piece for me last year when I was performing a recital at the University of Iowa. And it got a really great response. You know, new music is sometimes hard to approach with extended techniques and some of the crazy things that composers can do, but Omolchenko is a tuba player, and so he understands how to use a brass instrument effectively, how to take these extended techniques and make them seem natural. And so this piece takes the trombone and shows both the quiet, introverted side of it and also the explosive, extroverted side. And then I'm going to finish with perhaps the greatest of all trombone solos, which is the Cavatine by Camille Saint-Saëns.
How do you go about designing a program like this?
Well, when you're playing a solo recital, things can get, for lack of a better word, boring, because you're dealing with the same timbre over and over and over. When you've got an orchestra, you can change things up, you know, strings to woodwinds to brass to percussion to whatever. With trombone and piano, just the repetition of the sound color gets a little difficult to take after an hour.
Good point.
So what I like to do is to change the style as much as possible. I try and show variation just to keep it fresh. Even though it's still trombone and piano, the trombone can make many different sounds. And so I like to represent as much of that as possible.
When did you first become interested in trombone as a principal instrument?
Now there's a story. I was actually a serious piano player as a kid. Serious enough. I had been taking lessons since I was 6, and I was, I thought, relatively good. And I picked up trombone to play in the school band in 4th grade. And I didn't know whether or not I was good because I was in a very small school. There were only 4 people in the band. But then in high school, I went to Interlochen Arts Camp in Michigan. And I applied on both trombone and on piano. And I got into everything I wanted on trombone and nothing on piano. And that was the point when I dropped the piano.
There was a sign.
There was a sign. Clearly there's something happening for me on trombone, but not on piano. And you know, at age 16 or whatever I was, you don't really have the perspective to make that call for yourself. So you go by external validation, which Interlochen gave me very, very clearly.
Mm-hmm. Now, tell us, if you would, a little bit about your professional background as you pursued your work in trombone.
Well, after high school, I started out in college as a physics major.
Interesting.
That didn't last very long.
You had, in other words, initially you had no interest in being a music major, as you would say.
I wouldn't say I had no interest. I had interest, but I was trying to be practical. I thought it was more likely that I'd make a good living in physics.
Well,
well, but let's be honest. Either way, I was going to end up as a college professor, right? So it's really the same career track. The question is just what I'm teaching. So after a year in physics, I did switch to music. I got my bachelor's and my master's in Chicago, studying with the members of the Chicago Symphony, which I think the Chicago Symphony brass section's reputation speaks for itself. And then I went back to my hometown in Columbus and got my doctorate there. And after that, I played professionally for about 3 years. Which was a great experience. It was a whole separate kind of an education, freelancing and playing in 3 different orchestras, plus whatever other gigs I could pick up on the side. It was a fantastic time of my life, but there are some challenges with freelancing that led me back to a full-time job in teaching, which I love at least as much.
Talk about teaching. What is it about teaching that draws your attention?
Teaching is an art in itself.
I agree. Very true.
You can be a great performer and a horrible teacher, or a great teacher and a horrible performer. And I like the fact that I get to exercise my artistic side every day, trying to make a statement. That's what you're trying to do, whether you're on stage performing or whether you're in front of a class trying to convey some information. You're trying to make a statement that gets through to some people. It's a communicative experience. And as a performer, I was doing that on weekends. As a teacher, I'm doing it every day. And there's something about that. Plus, you play a great performance, and that's great until your next performance, when you have to do it again. As a teacher, if you make a statement, that sticks with a student for their entire lives.
Well said. Well said. Tell us about the experience you had working with members of the Chicago Symphony. What was that like?
Well, those guys are superlative in every way. Of course, they're technically proficient.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Beyond compare. But it's not just that. They have such a strong concept of what their music should be, what statement they're trying to make and how they're trying to make it. It's not just, I want to play a D flat here. It's specifically, what D flat do I want to play here? What color does it have? How does that note start? How does it end? How does it feed into the next note? How does it relate to the second violins on the other side of the orchestra? That kind of thoughtfulness pervades everything they do.
What was that like initially, though? As you said, members of the Chicago Symphony. I mean, we're talking about a phenomenal orchestra. That must have been a little bit intimidating when you first made your first.
Oh, sure. I mean, I was coming in from public school, Ohio. I hadn't been to an arts high school. The closest I'd been was Interlochen, but that's just a summer camp. So I walked into my first lesson. Of course, I'd had lessons for years, but never with somebody of that caliber. I didn't know what to do. I actually completely overstepped. I walked in with no etudes prepared, no kind of basic fundamental routine to demonstrate. I walked in with a book of orchestral excerpts because I just assumed that that's all we'd work on. Boy, was I wrong. He said, all right, if that's all you've got today, that's fine. We'll work on the Hungarian March. But next time, come with your Rochu book. And for 2 years, that's what we worked on. Just Rochu and Lipslers, because he wanted to make sure that my basic approach to playing was so solid that I couldn't possibly mess it up when I started talking about how to interpret the orchestral repertoire.
What advice would you give to a high school student who might be considering going into music as a profession?
I have 2 pieces of advice. First of all, make sure you have the end in mind before you begin. If you're going into it because you enjoy marching band, because you like hanging out with your friends in the band room, it might not be the right profession for you. Music is an avocation as much as it is a vocation. You need to be in it with your whole heart, your whole soul. You need to love playing your instrument just for the sheer joy of making those sounds. If that's you, then by all means, please come to South Texas College and study music. The other advice I have is practice your fundamentals. In brass, it's lip slurs, long tones. Make sure those are pristine, because everything else derives from that. If you can't count a rhythm and play your lip slurs with absolute smoothness and control, then you're not ready to do anything else. And by the time you get to college, you're going to want to do those things, and you'll be very disappointed if your teacher says, well, let's go back to maybe some more fundamental things, like I was. I speak from experience here.
Very good point. So what's the transition been like for you and your family moving down to South Texas? Very different from where you were before?
Well, certainly. I mean, the temperature is a little warmer.
Slightly.
But there are a lot of great things about McAllen. We've always been fans of Mexican food, and Mexican food here beats anything at any price in Michigan, Ohio, and Illinois. And, my wife was able to bring her job with her. My son is in a great school over in Mission. So I feel like we're very happy here as a family.
Good, excellent. I want to ask you some fun questions, if I might.
All right.
Completely unplanned here. Ben is good on his feet, so don't worry. Do you have a favorite composer?
Bach. It's more fun as a trombonist to play the late Romantics, Mahler, Wagner, Strauss. Those are just fun. It's a joy to play those pieces. But there is an elegance and a structural beauty in Bach that nothing else touches.
Favorite genre of music?
The late Romantics, for the reasons I just stated.
Exactly. Absolutely. Do you have a favorite hobby?
Yeah, I'm a foodie. I like to cook.
Really?
Yes.
We'll make note of that.
I like to cook. I like to brew beer. Anything that involves, because it's still an artistic endeavor. It's finding a way to communicate, to create an expression just on a plate instead of through my trombone.
Just keep in mind that moonshine's not legal here, okay?
Right, but if you buy the moonshine, that's legal, and then you can age it legally in your own oak barrel.
There it is. Do you have a favorite artist?
What kind of artist? Are you talking visual artist?
Visual artist, or perhaps a musical artist? Do you have someone that really resonates with you?
Yes, Evgeny Kissin, pianist.
Yeah.
He is
phenomenal.
Spectacular. He does things on the piano that I associate with full symphony orchestras.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good point. If you could have dinner with a past composer, apart from Bach,
apart from Bach,
if you could invite 3 composers to the table to have dinner with,
3 composers now.
I will say 3. Who would they be?
Strauss, because
which one?
Richard Strauss, because he did so many different things. He was, of course, a great opera composer. He composed all those tone poems.
Very good.
He was able to do a lot of different things within the same stylistic concept. But he also explored he explored serialism, he explored late Romanticism, all these different things. Schubert. Schubert, in music appreciation and music lit, we often teach him as an early Romantic composer. But if you really get into it, he's got the structure of a late classical composer. He's almost more related to Mozart than to Beethoven.
Yeah, good point.
And I like the way that he's able to take some of the Romantic language, which of course I enjoy, and use the structural integrity of the classical composers. And then I have to come up with a third. And I'm going to say Handel. Because Handel's life was long, and with the Germany and the England and all of these different places that he worked, the various courts he worked in, he had to be flexible and yet still say something of value, otherwise we wouldn't still be listening to him. And I would be interested to hear him talk about how that worked for him.
Excellent. Very nice. We really appreciate what you're doing here at the college, and you're doing some marvelous things. We're very, very excited about having Dr. Benjamin Coy as a colleague here, and look forward to more of his performances and having him stay with us hopefully a long time.
Thank you very much.
Good to be with you.
You too.